So one of the things that developed through this is this thing we call the program strands. And these are the things like Frontline, American Experience, American Masters, Great Performances, all those kind of things, which were originated by the member stations. And the idea was basically for this ongoing series, which they get funded by PBS on a national level, as well as getting their own corporate sponsors. And this fills up, these program strands fill up roughly 80% of the schedule. So most of the programming service schedule, which is basically prime time, 80% of it's filled up by these programming strands. So like WGBH in Boston does Frontline, Nova, and American Experience. Here in Washington we do NewsHour and Washington Week. New York does American Masters, Great Performances, Charlie Rose, and there are others, but those are sort of the big ones. So, given all that, we're talking about being producers down here. So, we're going to talk about two things: a producer with an idea, and then a producer with a finished show. In two different ways to sort of try to get into the system. First is a producer with an idea or a proposal. And when we talked about proposals, I had given you the link to PBS. They have a very clear description of what they want in a proposal and how to go about it. And they're pretty good about that these days, which is nice. So what you do as a producer with a proposal is you think about where the idea might logically fit, which is sort of what we're talking about here. So first of all, you think about, is it an idea that would fit within one of these programming strands? Is it a Frontline kind of thing? Is it a Nova kind of thing? Is it an American Experience, etc., etc.? And obviously you only know that by watching it a lot to figure out what they do, check their website, etc. You have to be familiar with the programming. Ideally, you would, have checked that out as you were doing your proposal, as we were doing for this week, in terms of what else has been done out there. So if it fits that strand, then you go and propose it to them. Because if you take it anywhere else, they're just going to say, well, go see WGBH, because that's a Frontline show, and that's who controls that. And they have the money. They can make a decision right there on the spot whether this is great, let's do it, we got the budget. And that takes a big load off of our shoulders as producers. Generally, they don't have all of the money, but they have enough of it that it can get us, to the point where it's easier for us to go out then and raise a little bit extra money if we need it. But anyway, if you fit within a strand and you can sell it to a strand, that's ideal. If it doesn't, that means then you're going to try to fit into that other 20% of the program schedule. And to get there, you got a couple of ways to go. You can, alright, so we go program strand. You can also go right to PBS, to the National Programming Service, which for us is very convenient because they're right over here in Arlington. And you can literally go there, or you can mail it in, but getting a meeting with them is not that complicated, it turns out. They're actually very nice people and happy to talk to producers. So it's a long shot. They get thousands of proposals a year. But they will respond, and if they're interested, they might ask you in. But the chances of getting, funded and all at that level are pretty slim. It does happen, but it's pretty slim. The better approach is generally to go to a member station. Because remember, member stations are providing 60% of those shows. So there are a couple of ways and reasons to select different member stations. One is you select the one where you live. You might have an in. You might be able to say, I'm a local producer here in Duluth, and you're the local PBS station. I'd like to chat with you. Or it's a station in an area that's appropriate for the story. So if you're doing a story that relates to Duluth, then you go and, oh, I put Duluth. And you go there and pitch it. If it's a very local story, it may just stay local, and if you're lucky, they say, oh, that's a great story, let's do it. We'll put it on our local, our local schedule. That's not bad. Get something produced, you start building up your credits. Or they may say, this is really great, it's got the local angle, but it really is something that we might develop that would have a national appeal by also going to Phoenix and Seattle and wherever, because there might be similar examples of whatever it is you're talking about. So together then, you become in a sense co-producers, and you go and then make these contacts, but you've got an automatic in because you're already working with a member station. And then you try to put that together that way. And then together as a group, you would go and pitch it to the National Programming Service to try to get them to kick in some bucks. The member stations would also be kicking in some money, but in a way more important than money, they kick in facilities. So they all have studios, they all have equipment, they all have edit bays, they all have people. So they have lots of good stuff to provide, which means you don't have to go out and raise the money for that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, did they make you did they make you find sponsors and stuff like that?
They make you raise some money. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So, anyway, so that's sort of a very good traditional way to get going. And not only do you get the co-sponsorship, but those guys, those people, the programmers at the member stations, know how the system works, they know what they look for, they're familiar with the structuring and all that kind of stuff, which particularly if you're starting out, you're not experienced with. So it's really great to have that kind of partner. And these are not people that you have to really worry about them ripping off your idea. That's, they're just not that not that part of the industry. So they're good partners to have. All right, if that fails, there's another way. If that fails, there's another way. You can take it to what we call a national presenting entity. And there are a number of these around. I've got here ITVS, which is, again, hopefully you looked at from today, is a sort of a generic one that takes all kinds of programming. There are other ones of these that are specific for other groups, usually minority groups. There's National Black Programming Consortium, Center for Asian American Media, Native American Public TV, and several others. And I gave you links to most of those. The idea behind these basically again grew out of the government and CPB when they realized that what was happening was 60% of the shows were coming this way. It was again sort of like a closed environment, and a lot of different voices weren't getting heard, particularly minority voices, particularly issues and stories that weren't mainstream. So they said, we would really like to support these, and all of the independent producers in the country, petitioned, etc., to try to figure out a way to solve this problem that PBS was becoming very sort of, not one-sided, very lowest common denominator, incestuous maybe. So they set up these entities and basically give them some money. So CPB gives these guys money and basically says, go out and find programs. Go out and find programs that meet your mission in terms of whether it's, serving the minority or serving the general, just sort of unheard stories kind of focus of IPBS. So this was in the early 90s, this started. And basically they have the money, and in this case, this is one of the few cases in public TV where they basically can fund the entire show, generally because these are not expensive kinds of programs. So they're usually very localized, they're not traveling around the world doing, expensive kind of production. In return, though, as a producer, you get the money, but in return you give up the broadcast license for 5 years to PBS. So you get the money from CPB and the license goes to PBS for 5 years, exclusive. You can't do anything else with it, broadcast, cablecast in the U.S. for 5 years.
Wait, I'm sorry, did you say you can't do anything, or anything just with that proposal?
That show.
That show, okay.
That show. They give you the money, you make the show. The show is, they have, PBS has an exclusive license, broadcast license. You can take it international, but you can't do it here. All right. That would be good except for what's happened is that there's no guarantee that PBS will air it. They get guaranteed to have the rights to the show, but they in turn don't guarantee to air it. So the fallout from all of this has been, and this is 20 years now, it hasn't really changed, is that a lot of very good programs have been made that never would have gotten made before. A lot of producers have gotten some great experience, but easily most of these shows have never been on the air. So, and by the time the 5 years is over and you can take it somewhere else, usually the topic is old. It's been on the shelf too long. You can take it international. You can do home video. You can four-wall a theater, but you can't do it on the air, which is where most people are going to see it. Yeah, Tracy.
So, why do they fund these programs? Like, that doesn't make any business sense to put money into
I'm
something.
talking about the government here.
Like, what's the reason for that?
The reason for it is that there are a lot of, not most, but there are many of these shows that do get aired. So, and it is still providing a great, from a producer standpoint, it's still providing a great way to get some of these stories made that you wouldn't ordinarily. There probably was going to be very little source of funds otherwise. So it's great for your career, etc. And maybe this is going to get out somehow. You may take it to festivals. Again, you may go home video. You may distribute it some other ways to get the message out. It just won't go on PBS. So, is it the ideal world? No, definitely not. But they still fund it, which is great. And PBS still says, you can't make us air it. And that's true. You can't make anybody air anything. That's our freedom. Yes. Bing, 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 right here, across here.
Okay, so to understand it right, PBS is a public-private partnership entity. It's like both funded partly by the government and then partly by the corporates.
It does get funds from corporate sponsors, but they don't have any ownership or control. It's just like, it's a
Charitable.
sort of. They write it off as a contribution because it's a non-profit. Nicole?
So in reference to these programs that have been made but then never aired, what happens if we take it overseas, it does great overseas, but someone here sees it and wants to bring it over here, not knowing that it's already been made for here, but we can't do anything with it for 5 years? What happens in that scenario?
Maybe PBS will say, oh well, maybe I should air it after all, or you're still stuck. You're still stuck. Did Carl?
But it seems like, 3 a.m. there would be time slots where there's nothing on PBS. So why can't they just throw in? What would be what would be